Now, of course, all this funding is coming while Carney is in his first week in office and amid threats from the U.S. president to annex Canada. Joining us right now is Senator Tony Dean, from December 2021 to November of 2024. He chaired the Senate Committee on National Security, Defense and Veterans Affairs. And in 2023, that committee released a report on Arctic security. Senator Dean, thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. Good to be here.
So listen, you and I spoke in 2023 when the Senate issued that report, the committee that you chaired. And in that report, you talked about why the over-horizon radar is needed. And here you now have Prime Minister Carney dedicating billions of dollars to its development. Why is it so important when it comes to Arctic sovereignty?
Well, first of all, we know the scale and scope of Canada's Arctic. 40% of its land mass, 75% of its coastline, less than 1% of its population. Directly to the north is Russia's Arctic. And for a decade or two, Russia has been developing its landing strips, its submarine facilities. It has nuclear-powered submarine station there, missiles. And so we have a very empowered Russia in its part of the Arctic. We know that the threat from that weaponry comes south, likely through Canada to the US. We've seen in the last several years the development of a whole new class of missiles, hypersonic and hyperkinetic, which have a much shorter journey time south. It means that our response time in monitoring those missiles and intercepting them has been shortened. So the more we go north with interceptors and tracking capacity, the more response time we have. Yeah. And that's what is planned with this Canada-Australia ground-based monitoring system.
And it is a co-venture, as you say. And when you say over the horizon, we're talking about going over the curvature of the Earth. But you mentioned Russia, but in addition to Russia, we also know China has ambitions when it comes to the Arctic. And all that was true when you and I spoke a couple of years ago. But you've now add onto it, Donald Trump, who's making these comments about annexing Canada. How do you view the United States vis-a-vis the North? Because on the one hand, we work with them when it comes to NORAD. On another, we have an American president who does not seem to respect Canadian sovereignty.
Well, NORAD will be 67 years old this May, and an anniversary will be celebrated, we hope. We hope to make it to the 67th year. Right now, as we would expect, NORAD's aircraft are in the air. Its defensive systems are on full alert, and Canada and the US jointly operate and command NORAD headquarters in Colorado Springs seamlessly. That command shifts from US to Canadian and back again. We hope it stays that way. But in the context of the current geopolitical situation, this is what you're leading us into. The US and its president is looking around at who it wants to partner with and who it wants its friends to be. And it certainly is becoming closer to Russia, and there seems to be some sort of closeness between President Putin and President Trump. But we have to worry about that. And we have to start thinking about developing our own capacity, Michael, and partnering with other suppliers of defence architecture. I think that's what's important about Australia. I think that's what's important about the Prime Minister's first meetings with heads of state in France and the UK, and his trip to the north today. We will likely have to diversify in terms of our defence infrastructure and look to partner potentially with other allies, particularly, obviously, NATO allies.
Going back to your report again, you talked about how the Arctic was at this inflection point. And today we now have this multi-billion-dollar investment in defense. We're also seeing hundreds of millions of dollars invested in energy infrastructure as well as housing. I don't have a lot of time left, but does that encourage you that we are meeting the needs of this inflection point, or is there still more that you want to see done?
I'm reminded that $420 million is going to go into northern defense operations. There will be a greater permanent presence of our forces in the north, which is welcomed actually by our northern neighbours. They are interested. What we heard from people living on the land right across the north and from northern leaders is that they would like to see defence investments paralleled by community investments. And we're seeing today investments in hydroelectric power, clean energy, in housing infrastructure, and likely the co-location in the far north of a permanent military presence supported by local peoples. And that combination of defence investment and social infrastructure investment is exactly what we heard from northern leaders as we crossed the Arctic.
So here we are, almost 2 years since your report. You're happy to see many of your recommendations coming into play now?
I am delighted, and I know that my colleagues on the Defence Committee would be also.
Senator Tony Dean, thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
Thanks very much, Michael.